To start the conversation about God, you have to know what you're talking about when you refer to God. Is God a man in the sky? Is God the power of the unknown? Or is there just nothing there and God is completely made up? I spent my childhood praying to God. I rarely wanted anything from God. I prayed thanking for all the good things in my life, that I would thank God for each of my teddies, which was a list of about 20 names. Thank you for Bunny, Scruffy, Barney, Benny, and so on. Then I would talk about my day and discuss my life. I would talk to God as a conversation with another person, rather than directly ask Him for any miracles. I think my reluctance to ask God for action really boils down to one thing. Miracles don't happen. The rules of how the world works are the same for Christians as for any other normal people. So to ask for a miracle where these rules are bent just for your own gain is to go against the causal nature of how the world works. I knew this deep down from an early age. God does nothing. If God existed, would I live my life any differently? Yes, I think so. I would focus all my energy on seeking God. There is definitely a part of me that wants there to be a God. And because I am not sure about God existing, an even smaller part of me seeks Him. Notice how I use a capital there when I refer to Him. I think that is the very small part of me thinking about God judging me. If it wasn't for dreams, I am not sure if I would be considering this problem about God's existence. Just when I think I've made up my mind that God is not part of my life, bam! Here's a dream talking to God while feeling His presence deep within me. The next morning I return to my doubtful self and think I should probably go to church now. It would be ideal if I could feel God's presence all the time, but even then I'm not sure that would cure me of doubt. If we always had a deep feeling like that, we would just climatize and get used to it. There would not... Without faith and a lack of God's presence in our life, maybe we would not value finding Him. I speak like this, of course, as if He exists and created the world like it is with a purpose. However, there just might be no God. So what if God does not exist? Is there any point to life without someone powerful looking at your every action and taking note? I suppose even without that transcendent power, you have other people around. So if you care about what others think of you, then you can derive some meaning to the world and have a purpose. I think to say that there are no morals the second God goes away is not true. Otherwise, you could do exactly what you wanted with no consequences. I think other people living with you cause you to take care with your actions, and you can find moral purpose in the helping of others. You could say that without God, there would be no people to care for, but even so, we still exist and God might not. For now, without God too. I live in a Western world in the early 21st century that makes living a good life possible. I have opportunities to find a career that suits me. I can spend time with family and friends. I can have time to rest each day, and there is plenty of entertainment online so that I am never bored. For such a world, a lot of good things have had to be put into place. We have to live in peace. We have to have freedom of speech. We have to live in a modern world where all our basic needs are provided for us. For all this to come into being, we have to have good values and a common sense of purpose for things to get done. If we never developed our agriculture, if we never went through the Industrial Revolution, or if we never defended the need for peace, then the world would not be such a good place. All of this was done when most of us went to church once a week and prayed to God as part of the Christian belief. This common belief amongst us all may have been the very reason that drove humanity to better themselves. Without God and religion, these good things may never have happened. Even when I am fully in Christian mode at certain times of my life, a very small amount of my day concerns God. I wake up and get ready, go to school or work, get home, watch TV and go to sleep. Not much of this is about God. When I think of it, not much of anything is about God. It takes quite some effort on the behalf of a Christian to make their life truly dedicated to God. No one really quite manages it. I am pretty sure that when people go about their lives because there is an obvious lack of God in the real world, there is a real lack of God in our minds when doing things. There is only one way to turn on a tap or to switch off a light. God does not act out here literally in our physical world. In reality, it's just us. On our own, we have to make a real What is faith? I think it's a blind step into the unknown and making a continual effort to reaffirm that this unknown is God. You can't be an expert about God. Everyone is on the same page. You believe in God based on your own personal experience. The more skeptical-minded you are, the more convincing these godly experiences need to be. Some people are easily convinced and do not need much, if any, personal experience to reaffirm the presence of God. For example, children can just trust their parents and Sunday school teachers that God exists. However, the adult congregation tends to need more evidence to back such a claim. Even the most faithful look at their own experiences for testimony that God exists. From my experience, when I have believed God exists, there has been a lot of recent personal evidence, such as dreams with God's presence. For some reason, dreams create this special place where I am comfortable believing God exists. Whether this is due to God actually appearing to me in my dreams or I have less sense of reality, so I can be easily fooled. One thing I find difficult about considering God in this unknown territory is the continual need for evidence of faith. I find myself always looking at past experience. Faith is when believing in God requires more than the evidence available. Faith is when God is not there, but you still think He is. Faith is those long stretches of time without God. Ultimately, to believe in God is to be comfortable in that unknown. Does everyone have the same version of God? It is the consensus among Christians that there is one God, and this is the same God for each person. So when one person has a vision about God and redirects their life based on that encounter, and another person has a little rush of energy during a church service and calls that the Holy Spirit, this is all apparently the same God. This is strange because when I feel emotions, I don't think that this is the exact same emotions as everyone else. My emotions are very much mine. But when I feel God, supposedly this is not mine, this is just common to all. God is probably appearing in millions of dreams each night, and He also makes time to give an appearance to every church service in the world on a Sunday morning across all time zones. And all this is just Christianity. What about all the other religions? Does God allocate different resources to fuel all of the supernatural experiences of Muslims and Hindus? I think that there is a God, but He does not necessarily present Himself in the same way to different people. It is remarkable that many different cultures, independent of each other, have beliefs around some transcendent deity that is referred to as God. In this sense, God does exist in the same way that emotions exist. Whether or not this God actually exists outside humanity and is an objective truth of the universe is not clear. Even if God does not exist literally, God exists to people. It almost makes more sense for God to exist. Imagine if God did not exist, and there are thousands of religions around the world over time, all based around a deity in some form or another. For all this to happen, for all these people to conclude that there is a God, there must be a deep underlying truth to it all that leans towards there being a God. People that are not religious are not very willing to accept that God is really true in some way. People are often divided. Either God exists or God does not exist. And the agnostics tend to be halfway between these two unmoving positions. For me, it makes more sense for the truth of God's existence to be somewhat like the Christian position that believes in a higher sense of being that connects us all, and somewhat like the atheist that finds it all a little made up. Unfortunately, there is not a strong position that caters for this middle ground. We like to be sure about things. It amazes me how so many different cultures have come to the same conclusion, albeit in various different forms, that God exists. There is just way too much of God in this world for it to be ignored. Maybe if it makes more sense for God to exist, it still could be that God exists in the form of something without such a religious structure. Perhaps we are all trying to describe the same underlying truth. Something resembling God exists, but he is not necessarily the man in the sky like so many of us want to believe.